Picture this. It is 1988. You are standing in the science fiction section of your local video store. You have already rented Terminator 3 times this month. Your eyes drift down to the bottom shelf, the one with the airbrushed covers promising chrome futures and laser-blasted wastelands. Nobody reviewed these films. Nobody warned you about them. And that was exactly the point. Film 1, Deathsport, 1978. Before we get to the 1980s, we need to go back to 1978 and talk about the film that started everything. Roger Corman had just produced Death Race 2000. It made a fortune. The logic was simple. Make something similar. Make it cheaper. Make it stranger. The result was Deathsport. Instead of killer cars, you get motorcycles with plastic tubes glued to the sides that shoot red laser beams when the budget allows. David Carradine plays a wasteland warrior, described in the script as something between a post-nuclear Jedi and a kimono-wearing gladiator. Claudia Jennings co-stars in what would tragically become her final film before her death in a car accident just months after production wrapped. The plot revolves around gladiatorial combat in a dystopian city run by a tyrant who controls the population through televised death matches. The execution involves slow-motion explosions, mystical hand gestures, and futuristic technology that appears to have been assembled from leftover garage renovation materials. The production was completely chaotic from start to finish. Corman and the director stopped communicating entirely by the third week of shooting. Scenes were improvised daily because the script kept changing. The practical effects team worked with whatever materials happened to be available on any given day. None of that should work. And yet, Deathsport has a quality that no amount of money can manufacture. A fevered dream logic that makes every scene feel like it exists slightly outside normal reality. The kind of film that lodges itself in your memory not despite its chaos, but because of it. This is where post-apocalyptic cinema found its identity, not in the big studio productions, in the bottom shelf, in the fever dream, in the beautiful disaster. Film 2. DEFCON 4, 1985. Most post-apocalyptic films give you a hero, give you hope, give you a reason to believe that humanity will survive whatever comes next. DEFCON 4 does none of those things. This Canadian production from 1985 is the most nihilistic science fiction film of the entire decade, and nobody talks about it because it offers absolutely nothing comfortable to hold on to. 3 astronauts are orbiting Earth when nuclear war breaks out below them. From space, they watch the planet become a burning ball of fire in real time. Then, they have to go back down into it. What they find when they land is not a world struggling to rebuild. It is a world that has abandoned the concept of rebuilding entirely. Violent gangs control every resource. Mutants roam the ruins. The survivors who retain their humanity are the exception rather than the rule, and even they are changing. Shot in Nova Scotia on a minimal budget, the film transforms forests and quarries into a genuinely convincing, devastated landscape through harsh gray photography that makes everything look simultaneously real and wrong. The production design team understood something that bigger budget productions often miss. Post-apocalyptic worlds do not look dramatic. They look tired, used up, gray. What separates DEFCON 4 from every other entry in this genre is its refusal to comfort the audience at any point. There are no inspiring speeches, no redemption arcs, no moments where the human spirit triumphs over adversity and proves that we deserve to survive. Just the cold, uncomfortable suggestion that after the bombs fall, the worst thing about the post-apocalyptic world would not be the radiation or the gangs or the mutants. It would be us, exactly as we already are, with nothing left to restrain us. Film 3, The Time Guardian, 1987. Australia made one of the most ambitious science fiction films of the entire decade in 1987, and the world almost completely ignored it. The Time Guardian begins with a premise genuinely worthy of a major studio production. The last city of humanity in the distant future is being hunted by an army of genocidal robots. Unable to defeat them directly, the city uses time travel technology to escape into the past, specifically into 1980s Australia. A temporal agent is sent ahead to warn the locals that a futuristic city is about to appear in their backyard, and that directly behind it will come chrome robots designed specifically to kill every human being they encounter. The miniature effects are extraordinary for the budget. The production design team constructed robot suits and city models with a level of detail that genuinely competes with films costing 5 times as much. The costume department embraced the angular metallic aesthetic of the era without apology, and the results are genuinely striking on screen. Where the film struggles is in its narrative mechanics. The story trips repeatedly between action sequences and expository dialogue scenes that slow the momentum at exactly the wrong moments. Characters explain things that the audience has already understood. The pacing reflects a production that was trying to do too much with too little time. But here's what matters. You can feel the effort in every single frame. Every limitation is the result of genuine ambition running up against genuine constraints. This is science fiction made by people who cared deeply about what they were making, even when what they were making wasn't quite reaching what they were imagining. That gap between ambition and execution is exactly what makes it worth watching 40 years later. Film 4: The Lost Planet, 1986. Every once in a while, a production comes along that has no business being as entertaining as it is. The Lost Planet is an Italian television production from 1986 that appears to have been created in a parallel dimension where budget was completely optional, but ambition was legally required. A spacecraft crashes on a mysterious planet covered in ancient ruins, mystical crystals, and villains wearing capes of such impossible scale that the physics of movement become genuinely questionable. The spaceship models hang from wires that the production made absolutely no effort to conceal. The laser beams frequently miss their targets by several feet in directions that suggest the effects team and the camera crew were not watching the monitor. The dubbing is so gloriously out of sync that in certain scenes, the characters appear to be responding to dialogue that hasn't happened yet. None of that matters. What The Lost Planet has is something that polished productions spend millions trying to manufacture and almost never achieve: pure theatrical commitment. Every performer on screen is playing their role with the absolute conviction that this is the most important story ever told. The synthesizer score underlines every dramatic gesture, as if the entire production is a galactic opera performed specifically for you at 2 in the morning. Filmed in Italian quarries standing in for alien worlds, the production communicates genuine craftsmanship within its limitations. This is not lazy filmmaking disguised as science fiction. It is creative problem-solving at its most inventive. If you caught this late at night on cable television in 1986, it felt like a strange dream you couldn't quite remember by morning. Chaotic and unforgettable simultaneously. Film 5: She-Wolves of the Wasteland, 1988. Also known as Phoenix the Warrior, and the title alone tells you everything you need to know about where this film sits in the post-apocalyptic spectrum. A biological war has pushed man to the edge of extinction. The result is tribal warrior women dominating the desert with motorcycles with lasers and shoulder pads of genuinely impossible scale. The story follows a lone fighter protecting a pregnant woman considered the genetic hope of all humanity from a cybernetic villain whose aesthetic belongs somewhere between a heavy metal music video and a fever dream. Shot in the California desert on a modest budget, the film commits completely to constant action, striking costumes, and a deliberately exaggerated tone that mixes genuine female empowerment themes with the visual exploitation conventions of the era. It is a film fully aware of its own contradictions and entirely untroubled by them. She-Wolves of the Wasteland does not want your critical analysis. It does not want your nuanced reading of its gender politics. It wants you to watch warrior women on motorcycles fight a cybernetic villain in the desert and have the most straightforwardly entertaining 90 minutes you have experienced all week. On those terms, it succeeds completely. This is unashamed B-movie filmmaking operating at full confidence, loud, dusty, relentlessly entertaining, and exactly the kind of film that disappeared into the video store bottom shelf and somehow outlasted everything that was supposed to matter more than it did. Film 6, Cyborg, 1989. This film was never supposed to exist. Cyborg was produced because a studio needed to use sets and equipment that had been prepaid for a different production that was suddenly canceled. Director Albert Pyun and a skeleton crew were given the leftover resources and told to make something. Anything. Just make it fast. What Pyun made with those leftovers was the defining visual language of late 1980s post-apocalyptic cinema. Jean-Claude Van Damme plays Gibson Rickenbacker, a mercenary hired to escort a partially cybernetic woman who carries the cure for a devastating plague through a wasteland controlled by a pirate gang led by the villain Fender, played with genuinely savage intensity by Vincent Klin. The story is stripped to its absolute minimum. Travel, fight, survive, repeat. There are no subplots, no comic relief, no romantic distractions, just the relentless forward movement of a man who refuses to stop walking towards something he has almost no reason to believe in anymore. What makes Cyborg extraordinary within its genre is its tone. This is not fun post-apocalyptic cinema. This is not the campy adventure of Deathsport or the theatrical excess of She-Wolves. Cyborg is genuinely dark. Long walks under gray skies, raw violence with real physical consequences, a constant low-level sense of hopelessness that never fully resolves even when the credits roll. Van Damme understood the film he was in. His performance is almost entirely physical, minimal dialogue, maximum movement, and it is precisely right for what Pyun needed. You rented it because of the cover. You remembered it because of how it made you feel. Not excited, not entertained, unsettled, in the best possible way. Film 7, Space Raiders, 1983. Roger Corman looked at Star Wars making hundreds of millions of dollars and asked one question: how cheaply can we make that? The answer was Space Raiders, a space adventure constructed almost entirely from effects footage and set pieces recycled from other Corman productions. If you watch carefully, you will recognize ships, explosions, and entire sequences from at least 3 different films that had nothing to do with each other before Corman's editors assembled them into something new. The story follows a young boy who accidentally ends up aboard a spacecraft piloted by a gang of mercenaries, led by a hardened captain who has absolutely no interest in becoming a father figure. What begins as an involuntary kidnapping gradually transforms into something resembling a bond between people who have no business caring about each other. Space Raiders works for a reason that has nothing to do with its budget, or its recycled effects, or its modest production values. It works because the relationship at its center is genuine. The chemistry between the captain and the child feels real in a way that expensive productions with professional child psychologists on set frequently fail to manufacture. 2 performers finding something honest in the middle of laser battles and recycled spaceship footage. Corman made this film for almost no money and almost no time with almost no resources, and somehow, within those constraints, his production captured something that the films with 10 times the budget and 100 times the crew were trying to find. That is the entire story of the bottom shelf, the entire story of the video store, the entire story of a generation that grew up understanding instinctively that the most interesting thing in the room was rarely the thing everyone was pointing at. It was always the thing nobody had warned you about, on the shelf below, with the airbrushed cover, waiting for Friday night. Film 8, Steel Dawn, 1987. Before Patrick Swayze was the romantic icon of his generation, he picked up a sword in the Wasteland. Steel Dawn is essentially Shane relocated to a post-nuclear desert with 1980s haircuts and a synthesizer score. Patrick Swayze plays Nomad, a lone warrior who arrives at a small community being terrorized by a tyrant controlling the water supply, the most valuable resource in a world where everything else has been destroyed. The plot sounds familiar, it should. Mysterious stranger arrives, helpless community, training montage, final confrontation. The film is not trying to reinvent anything. It is trying to execute a classic structure with the specific aesthetic of its moment, and it executes it with more intelligence than its reputation suggests. Director Lance Houle understood that the film's primary asset was Patrick Swayze moving through a landscape. He built everything around that asset. Long shots of Nomad crossing vast empty desert spaces, precise sword choreography that prioritizes elegance over spectacle, minimal dialogue that trusts the audience to understand what is happening without being told. Steel Dawn is quiet by the standards of its genre. There are no massive explosions, no overwhelming set pieces, no moments designed specifically to make you jump out of your seat. What it has instead is a specific kind of stillness that very few action films of any era achieve, a patience with its own world that makes the violence when it comes feel genuinely consequential rather than purely spectacular. It is a Western disguised as science fiction, and it is significantly better than anyone who has not seen it would believe. 8 films from the bottom shelf of the video store. None of them had action figures, none of them had Saturday morning cartoons, but every single one of them taught a generation something that the big studio productions never could, that the future was probably going to be dusty, strange, and full of people doing whatever it takes to survive. Drop your favorite forgotten post-apocalyptic film in the comments right now. Subscribe and turn on the bell.